Bio 2. We're going to continue on with reptiles today, and the focus of now is going to be on modern reptiles and how they are adapted to life on land. So because we said this is our first group of animals in general, and our first group of vertebrates can live its entire life away from the water. So how are reptiles adapted to life on land? So there's tough, scaly skin and the ability to control body temperatures are two major adaptations to terrestrial life or to life on land. So this is a really important slide here. Tough, scaly skin and the ability to control body temperature are two adaptations to terrestrial life. And then other adaptations that have contributed to the success of reptiles on land are well-developed lungs, so just the ability to breathe air and breathe it effectively, a double-loop circulatory system, which we'll get to in a second, a water-conserving excretory system, strong limbs, internal fertilization, and shelled terrestrial eggs. So this is another really important slide, kind of going along with the tough, scaly skin and the ability to control body temperature of things that are really important to reptiles to help them live on land. So our first one is body temperature control. So reptiles are what are called ectotherms, or ectothermic animals. So this is another, again, this is an important vocabulary word for this chapter, is ectotherms. And these are animals that rely on behavior to control their body temperature. So for example, what they do, if they need to warm up, they bask in the sun, or they can stay underwater at night, because water, actually underneath the water during nighttime, could be kind of one of the warmer areas because water is kind of harder to lower the temperature of. So an ectothermic animal is an animal that relies on behavior to control its body temperature. And again, to warm up, you can bask in the sun. And the opposite, if they want to cool down, they can move to the shade, or they can take shelter in underground burrows. So that is how they can control their body temperature. They do it by behavior. And so feeding, so in order to live on land, there's a lot of food there, so reptiles can eat a wide variety of foods. So our first example, they just kind of give us some examples. Iguanas eat plants, so iguanas are just a large lizard. Snakes, we all have seen snakes before. They can eat anything from small animals, they can eat bird eggs, and they can eat other snakes as well. Crocodiles and alligators, they eat fish and land animals. And then chameleons, which are the kind of the ones that can change the color of their skin, they are going to eat insects. And then for respiration, reptile lungs are very spongy, which allow a large surface area for gas exchange. So we remember that's kind of been a characteristic of lungs and gills, is to have a large surface area, so for the most gas exchange to occur. So reptiles are no different. And reptiles have muscles around their ribs that kind of expand and collapse the chest cavity, again to help with the breathing process. And most reptiles will have two lungs, but there are certain species of snakes that just have one lung. So that is how they can respire, that is how they breathe. And I would say, knowing that there are most reptiles have two lungs, but certain species of snakes just have one lung, might be an important thing we need to know off of this slide. And for circulation, reptiles have what's called a double loop circulatory system. And so how this functions is that one loop will bring blood to and from the lungs. So that means there's one loop of blood in our heart, or not in our heart, in a reptile's heart, that's responsible for bringing blood to and from the lungs, and then the other loop is responsible to bring blood to and from the rest of the body. And so having these very defined jobs, these very specific tasks, make it a lot more efficient in actually moving the blood around. And we'll get to actually, we'll bring this picture up here now. Okay, well, we'll get to it in a second. We'll get to what the actual heart looks like. So this is just kind of some of the general anatomical structures we're going to need to know for the reptile. We have a turtle here, obviously, with the heart, the lung, the liver, our digestive tract, the bladder, the kidney, and the cloaca. So those are all important functions, or important organs here in the function of a reptile. And then to keep kind of going on with the heart, the reptile heart has two atria, so that was atrium if you remember that word, either one or two ventricles. And most reptiles have one ventricle with a partial septum. So a septum, remember, is just kind of like a wall-like structure, and so they have a partial wall that separates oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor blood. And then crocodiles and alligators have two atria and two ventricles. And so then here is our double loop system. Again, this one loop over here starting on the left or it says from the lungs, so we have our blood coming in from the lungs, it passes through here, and then it goes back to the lungs out here, where we have from the body, then to the rest of the body. So that is how the reptile heart works. And for excretion, this is a kind of another big characteristic of this group. And for excretion, urine is always produced in the kidneys of our reptiles. And in some reptiles, urine will flow in tubes directly into a cloaca, so it's just kind of a direct path from the kidneys. However, in others, there's a bladder that will store urine before it is expelled. And then another, so that's just kind of if the reptile produces urine. Kind of another way is that other reptiles will convert their ammonia into what's called a uric acid. And so why this is important is that inside of the cloaca, the urine is actually reduced to crystals of uric acid that form a pasty white solid. And so it's not just going to let out all of the moisture that kind of comes in urine, because urine, we obviously know, is a liquid. So in some reptiles, they convert that liquid into a solid, and by doing this, they can conserve water. So they can actually prevent themselves from losing water that could be really important to help carry out something else, carry out some other body function, keep them hydrated on a really hot day when they don't have a lot of water available to them. So that's kind of an important thing here. I would just say knowing the main difference between that some reptiles just let out urine directly, some convert their urine into a solid that's known as uric acid to help them conserve water. So this is an important slide to know. So for our next kind of adaptation to life on land is that their ability to respond. So response, so reptilian brains are very similar to amphibians. So we did the activity with the fish brain as well. This is kind of similar to amphibians, which is kind of similar to reptiles. And their cerebrum and cerebellum are more developed than other parts of the brain. So they just kind of have a more well-developed cerebrum and cerebellum. And reptiles that are active in the day have complex eyes, so they can see color well. So that's obviously kind of an obvious adaptation. If you're going to be active during the daytime, you're going to need to be able to see the colors that go along with that. And many snakes also have an extremely good sense of smell. And so that's kind of, snakes can really pick up on kind of the smallest cues to help them find their prey. And most reptiles have sensory organs in their mouth that detect chemicals when reptiles flick their tongues. So this is most commonly seen in snakes, but other reptiles do it as well. But anytime they stick out their tongue, they're actually tasting their environment, if you will, and they're actually picking up on different chemicals that could help lead them to food, or most likely food is basically what they're always after. And reptiles have a simple ear with an external eardrum and a single bone that will conduct sound to their inner ear. And so snakes can also pick up on vibrations in the ground through bones in their skulls. So snakes are kind of really well adapted to hunting. They have a lot of interesting characteristics. And then some snakes can also detect the body heat of their prey. And then what are organs that are called pits, so we have like what are called pit vipers, and they actually pick up the body heat of their prey. So a lot of interesting response going on in reptiles, a lot of it being with snakes because they are very efficient predators. And so for movement is what we're going to end today with our reptiles. So reptiles with legs are obviously going to have limbs that are very strong and are very large, and some are rotated further under the body, which enable them to carry more body weight. So they have very large limbs, and they can actually carry weight very easily as well. And the legs and feet of many aquatic turtles have developed into flippers, so they help them swim. And reptiles' backbones help accomplish much of their movement as well. So having a flexible backbone helps them move as well. So that's it for section 2, or part 2 of reptiles. Let me know if you have any questions.